It's in my photo one class. I see you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and have Sarah get started on this. We will see where this journey takes us. We will be in it together. Perhaps audio will come back from us to her, in which case we will have some Q&A. But without any further ado, I am going to try and present to you Sarah Stellino.
All right, everybody ready? All right, cool. So I'm just going to share my screen. Can everybody see that, the screen? Maybe a thumbs up if you can.
Sure.
Okay, cool. All right, so I am going to be talking a little bit about my process in documenting community with large format photography. I'm Sarah Stellino. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about what inspired my want to document community, the importance of text in my work, and kind of the three main bodies of work that I've been working on recently. So those bodies of work are queer and rural spaces, my own family history, as well as my fertility journey with my wife. So in the beginnings of my documenting community, this book was really influential. So this book is called We Are Everywhere, Protest, Power, and Pride in the History of Queer Liberation. So it was essentially, it was like the catalyst for me to begin to explore what it would mean to document community. And this quote really stuck with me. I'll just read it. It says, looking at the pictures together, we'd get lost for hours. We had a visceral emotional reaction as if we discovered a family album full of people to whom we were deeply connected, infinitely indebted, and about whom we knew next to nothing. So reading this book, it really made me want to participate and continue to leave a trail of photographs for the next generation to find. So as I was going through and thinking about wanting to participate in this, I started by photographing my friends. So this was a portrait that I took of my friend Anna. As I was going through the process and taking portraits of my friends, I really wanted it to be more than just a snapshot feeling. So in this portrait, I gave her the opportunity to reflect on her experiences thus far in life being a queer person. So I'll read what she wrote in her reflection as well. So she said, living an authentic life as it relates to gender identity hasn't always been easy. Like many other masculine of center women, or so I assume, the process was gradual. My life changed when I cut my hair at the age of 21. I got stared at and kept from going into the women's bathroom. I was filled with rage during that part of my life. I ripped the stall door off at a bar one time. Through my 20s, I grew immensely. I journaled, went to therapy, and immersed myself in queer culture. The first time I ever felt normal was when I was 25. I went to Pride Fest in Chicago, and a whole new world opened up to me. I found the love of my life who has taught me more about loving myself than anyone else I had met. I still have good days and bad days, but overall this journey in being queer and true to myself is one I wouldn't trade for anything. So what I really liked about having the reflection and pairing that with the portrait is that I felt like it gave me so much more sense of who this person is and what their experiences have been. Even in this process, I still felt like I needed a bit more of a direction. So with the beginnings of my queer and rural spaces, I was really thinking a lot about what is my purpose. So I was thinking about where my wife and I were going to settle down and start our family. And I had lived on a farm before, but I wasn't fully out, and I wasn't sure that I'd feel safe being in an openly gay relationship in a rural area. So that's what started me down the path of wanting to talk to queer people who are already there and living those experiences. So as I was thinking about going down this path and kind of narrowing who I was taking portraits of, I was really wanting to think about the ethical implications of working within a community. So I wanted to think about, was I doing justice to the complexity of their stories? Was I giving as much of myself as I'm taking? And really, ultimately, I didn't want it to feel transactional. I wanted to have an investment in them as a person. So whether we were sharing a meal together, spending time together, or even helping with farm duties, um, and I just wanted to help kind of like cultivate that atmosphere of reflection by spending time together and talking about their experiences. So I'm just going to show some of my portraits and some of their reflections. So this is Sam. So this was my first portrait in the series. I actually met Sam through a queer Facebook group in Wisconsin. That's where I'm from. And my wife and I signed up for their vegetable CSA. So we were helping harvest tomatoes last summer. So I have a couple photos of that. So, as we talked with Sam, they talked about their connection with nature and how it relates to their queerness. So, I'm going to read Sam's quote as well. So, they say, I identify lots of ways: Sam, he, him, or they, them, queer, trans, sometimes agender, gender fluid, gender queer, Taiwanese American, multiracial, settler, mostly middle class, farmer, gardener. Occupying space as a queer person and farmer feels really stabilizing. And I also feel spiritually, emotionally, and physically connected to myself and everything around me. I feel actually more connected to life and death in this weird way. It's like I'm seeing the whole cycle of it, and one thing feeds another. Everything returns to the land, and everything comes from the land. On top of that, I feel like I'm always trying to find my role in the movement, in life, and I think making space for people, growing things, and providing things that support and nourish people is a role that I really feel connected to and feel good in. And this is Emmy and Hannah, and we met them in Virginia. So we drove out to Virginia, and they also had a toddler. Emmy on the left is or was pregnant at the time. Um, so we toured their farm. We met their pigs. They have kuni pigs, um, and we camped in their front yard. So as we talked later that night, Emmy was opening up about the nuances of her gender identity while being pregnant. So what Emmy was saying is, I really am out of love with my identity right now. Being this pregnant is really strange. I was trying to explain this to Hannah the other day. My identity has always been really odd as far as like I look like I'm really cisgender female, and I am. It just frustrates me a lot of the time because this is just the way I look. I want to be a guy with a shirt and my pants on. I don't look like this when I'm pregnant. It's absolutely impossible. While I don't identify as trans, I identify as on the spectrum of transness. That's why I just go with queer. I identify as female specifically because I like the transgressiveness of identifying as female and then looking like something else, which I cannot do when I'm like this. And honestly, I look so standardly female right now that it's very disconcerting. And this is Shoshana. So Shoshana was in North Carolina, and we went to visit, and she gave us a tour of their farm and their beekeeping, and we had a meal with her and her housemates. And actually, Shoshana's pictured amongst the amaranth crop. So they got this seed from indigenous Mayan folks from Guatemala. They've been keeping this seed for generations beyond count, and they actually lost access to their land due to a civil war. So the indigenous Mayan folks created this network of international seed growers to distribute it so that they wouldn't be at risk of losing that crop again. So that was kind of a really special thing that she talked about. And what Shoshana was saying, she said, I identify as a queer trans woman. And I kind of still probably always will be working out my relationship with gender. I use both she and they pronouns, but these days I prefer she. I use the words queer, sapphic, pansexual, and bisexual to describe my sexuality, pretty interchangeably depending on context. I'm also Jewish of Ashkenazi descent, which is an important part of who I am. My identity exists in a lot of liminal spaces. I live in the border region of womanhood and also in the border region of whiteness. Being in rural spaces, especially living and working on farms, gave me context and permission to embrace my queerness, both in sexuality and gender. Nature is very queer, and seeing that play out as often as you do on a farm, from crops that sprout intersex flowers to livestock displaying gender defined behaviors, and having gay sex really helps every kind of identity feel natural and normal and precedented in all of its existence. Rural queer living has its unique challenges, but it's also filled with wonderful blessings. It's tough to cobble together my trans healthcare from medical tourism to Atlanta and the West Coast. And yet, when a hormone refill gets delayed in the mail, there's a well established underground local network of support to help me out in the interim. The queer community in rural spaces can be less visible to outsiders, but it feels especially tight and supportive. A friend once put it really well. Rural queers have better conflict resolution skills than urban queers simply because we have to. We can't afford to fracture our community because of a breakup, so we learn how to work things out and communicate better. And so this is Rufus. We met Rufus, who also lives in Wisconsin, through Instagram actually. So this first portrait was in their first season of their flower CSA. I've went back and visited Rufus since, and now this is their second year of their flower CSA that just finished up. But kind of when we spent this first day together, we spent the afternoon pulling weeds and kind of just helping out with the flower beds. And in our conversation, we talked about their identity and what it's like for them to be a rural queer. So Rufus said, it can be an interesting project to name my queer identity. There's dynamism involved. In my experience and knowledge of myself, and in the continual refinement and discovery of language. Trans masc, genderqueer, dyke daddy is how I would describe myself at this time. My pronouns are they, them. I am white and my roots are Eastern European. I am an artist, dancer, and first year flower farmer. As rural queers, it is often not safe for us to be open about who we are. We keep our heads down and try to go about our days as best we can. When I first started seeking the queers out here, there were very few folks who were out and visible. Feeling profoundly isolated, I fled to the city whenever I could to have access to community. In recent years, the climate in our area has begun to shift. Not only are the queers becoming more visible, but more seem to be moving here because they feel welcome. What gives me the most hope are the vibrant, brave, and resilient queer youth who are springing up and working passionately for social justice and who are fighting on behalf of those in the community who do not yet have the support and safety to be visible. So I have one more to share from this series. So this is FL. She also lives in Wisconsin. And I actually found FL from an old article in a local LGBTQ magazine talking about the growing community of lesbian farmers. So we rode around the gator and toured her farm. And we literally talked for like hours. But so in FL's reflection, she talked about her butch identity and the difficulty of making a living wage while farming. So FL said, "My name is FL Morris and I use she, her pronouns. Sometimes I question why. I am gender ambiguous in all senses, so my gender is butch. I love women and I identify as a dyke. It's been an interesting journey to be the way I am in a small town rural farm country. I started working on our special piece of land located within the traditional territory of the Ho-Chunk people in the late summer of 2007. The first few years, most neighbors ignored me aside from distant neighborly waves. As I grew my market farm business, managed our land with respect, added many types of livestock, built a high tunnel and propagation greenhouse, and created a generally picturesque veggie and cut flower farm year after year in the valley below our road, local folks started to feel compelled to stop in and chat with me. They often told stories of how my farm reminded me of their grandparents. I was often the first queer, non-cisgendered person my neighbors had ever met. So this series has really affected the way in which I go about photographing my own family as well. Just in the way that I'm searching for like a deep connection, authenticity, and making an effort to preserve my own family history as well. So these are just a couple portraits that I have been taking in my family series as well. So this is my mom on the left, and my in-laws in the center, and my sisters on the right.
Sarah, let me know if you can hear me on that
But I
side.
still wanted to think about incorporating stories into the portraits, so I've done a little bit of that with family as well. So in these portraits, my dad's on the left, my mom's on the right. So in the making of the portrait with my dad, we went to the house that his late father had grown up in, and he decided to wear his grandfather's old work shirt as well as his dad's ring. And as we were making photographs, we wanted to explore our family's history together. So we were talking about, he's wearing the work shirt of my great grandpa Saul. You can kind of see his name there on the left side. So we were talking about how his family came to the US from Poland in 1902. Um, and I think he was really young, and he was 2 years old, so they came to escape the escalating persecution of the Jews before World War One. And they changed their name actually at Ellis Island and moved to the center of the country to get as far away from the coast as possible, just in case the secret police was following them. So we were really trying to focus on kind of honoring that, and with each click of the shutter, each portrait we took, he was really trying to think of his dad and his grandfather. In the portrait on the right, my mom's father has been a pilot all of his life, and very often their relationship has been strained. In the last couple years, my mom became a pilot as well. So this is a portrait that I took of her doing the annual maintenance on a plane. I think it was a couple years ago now. And in the last couple months, even I've been trying to explore more of the family's history. So these on the left, these are some of our old family photographs of mostly of my grandfather. Um, the bottom left photo that's within that is my grandpa Saul on his wedding day. And this is, on the right is my grandfather, um, and kind of some pieces of family heirlooms and different menorahs and things like that at my aunt's house. These were just a couple that I took yesterday, actually. I've been thinking a lot about Judaism and kind of like how that plays a role in my life, too. So, the last body of work that I'm doing is about the fertility journey for me and my wife. Sorry, I just saw that you asked a question. What are the general dates on these photos? For the family photos, I'd say these were all within the last year and a half. But the photos themselves, like within this, are from maybe between the 50s and 60s. Hopefully that answers your question. So, getting into the fertility journey, so this series began as a personal reflection of our journey in using my brother as our sperm donor. So I first started this because I wanted to help our future child understand their origin story, how they came into this world, but also I wanted to shed light on the intimacy and intentionality of growing a queer family and just kind of like what goes into that. So in the photographs in this series, I'm really hoping to show all of the emotions that went into each step in the process. So this is the first photograph that I took in the series, and I'm still kind of feeling out how this is going to all take shape. So I've been writing reflections as we've been going through it. So I'm just going to read my reflection from this part. When we began this process, I had a lot of anxiety and fears around asking my brother to be our sperm donor. Even in my brief discussions with people around me, I heard the words, "It would be like his kid," and my heart rate immediately increased. Already, as the mother who wouldn't be carrying our child, I was struggling to define and wrap my head around my role in the process of bringing our child into the world. Hearing those words immediately made me feel like an outsider in my own family. I did not want to have to fight for my own place as my child's parent. I wanted to share genetics with my child, but I wasn't sure if that would come at a price. When the day came to go meet with my brother and his fiance, we tried to outline the things that we wanted to say, the emotions that came with being gay and wanting your children to share your genetics, and ultimately setting the tone of openness, honesty, and no judgment. I knew my brother Jake was incredibly sweet, thoughtful, and generous, but I hadn't known his fiancee, Amy, very deeply. She was open and honest, saying how the question had caught her off guard at first, but the more time she had to think about it, she felt open to exploring whether this could work for both of our families. There were some stipulations and details that needed to be worked out with the beginning of both of our families underway, but the door was open and that was good enough for now. So this is a portrait that we had taken while we were in the process of finalizing the sperm donation agreement. And so while waiting for the contract to be finalized, the research began for how to do an insemination at home. So my wife created charts to track her ovulation and signs of fertility. And after gathering data for months, we had our first opportunity to truly begin growing our family. So the night after our first insemination, we were laying in bed and I was looking into my wife's eyes and thinking about how we were intentionally taking this next step together. So um, kind of part of my reflection was talking about like how amazing were the lengths we went through to get here. How lucky are we to be so truly loved, selflessly understood, and supported by our families. We're still in the midst of trying to conceive. These photos are very recent, so um, and just by visually exploring our emotions as we go through this process, um, it really allows me to intentionally occupy this moment in our lives. So it really helps me process and feel the significance of each moment. Um, So, having talked about all the details about these different bodies of work, making these intentional portraits has really shown me the importance of legacy. Just leaving behind the stories of people and even my family as well, just for the next generations to find. So, I guess now we can open it up for questions if anybody else had any, although I'm not sure if the audio is working.
Let's see.
Can you hear us? No.
Let's see.
I can see the chat.
Oh,
Yeah.
excellent. Okay. So I have a couple of questions to ask. Does anybody have a question that they would like to? Yeah.
If she shoots only in black and white.
I do only shoot in black and white. So I use a large format view camera and I develop all my own black and white film, and I'm really kind of partial to black and white, but I also really enjoy making prints in the darkroom. So kind of on both sides, I'm a black and white person. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, I feel like I heard from a lot of different places that the best work that you make is close to home. Um, and it's kind of been a natural progression in starting to like document myself and my family. I would say it's much harder documenting myself and my family, maybe because I'm more critical, or especially when I'm in the photographs that we're trying to take, it's really hard to be in both places. Um, but in some ways, I'm most passionate about creating work about me and my family, just because I know that no matter what, that's important work for my family to find later. So at the end of the day, I won't regret making that.
I just asked how the process of being seen has been for the
That's a great
subjects
question
in
too.
the rural project.
I'm not sure if people can hear this or see these questions. Can they? Like, should I repeat the questions? No. Okay. Yes, repeat it? Okay. So how has the process of being seen been for the subjects in the Rural Queer Project? Either as they see the images or as other people do in the wider audience? That's a great question. I'm always cognizant of how people feel being photographed and feel having the photograph viewed. So I really try to be upfront about what I'm looking to do with the portraits, and just so they don't feel caught by surprise, whether they're being shown in a bigger area, or arena, or however you want to say it. Um, I'd say for the most part, people feel really good and feel seen in the images, like when I send them over to them afterwards, which I think is, obviously I feel good about it. I want them to feel seen and feel like they've been authentically portrayed. Um, I never feel confident in that, just because I can try to get to know somebody as best I can, but ultimately they're the judge of whether that feels authentic to them. And thus far, people have been very happy and feeling like they're being seen for who they are. And they feel very validated through that. Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like certain people are obviously more expressive about it than others, but it's always heartwarming because I feel really good about the connections that I make with them when we're together. But obviously, I want that to continue to translate. So it's been good thus far.
Yeah.
Um, how how does she display her bodies of work? Like especially the first one.
Yeah. So how do I display the bodies of work, especially the Rural Queer Project? I'd say for the most part, I've displayed a few family photos actually in a gallery. Ian Lewandowski is doing a group show. I'm not sure if we talked about that. Okay. Yeah, so other than that, I do have a few photos of queer and rural spaces in there as well. I haven't done too much display of any of my bodies of work, especially queer and rural spaces. Um, Eventually, I would like to make it into a book. Galleries are really amazing. Just to see them in a bigger form and on the wall feels really special, but ultimately, I want it to be in people's living room and libraries and things so that people can continue to see them beyond just an exhibition.
Other questions? Yeah.
Um, her photos feel like very natural as she's taking. Like it looks natural, but like it's such a personal setting. Like how does she go about making the subject feel not? How does the camera not feel intrusive in her work? If that makes sense.
So the photos feel very natural, but it's such an undertaking. How do you go about making it not feel intrusive to the subject? That's another good question. I'd say with large format photography, it's inherently intrusive. I mean, any photograph is, but it's quite a process to compose an image, have them sit there, find a way of kind of occupying that space that feels natural. Um, but I feel like a large format camera, it almost gives you time to settle, um, which kind of gives them space to not necessarily feel like I'm getting up in their space because I'm standing next to the camera and we're still interacting person to person. I feel like that um, goes a long way in making it feel like that. But I definitely try to make a connection with them prior to photographing. And I feel like that helps too. Have you photographed a range of ages in the rural queer work? Do you see a change over time in how people see themselves or their communities? Dang, these are all good questions. Okay. So I'm going to answer the second. Well, okay, I'll go first part first. I kind of have photographed a range of ages. I really would love to take some photographs of older queer people in those spaces. I'm still working on how to find that kind of subset of that community. So far, most of the people that I've found have been through social media. Um, so I feel like there are maybe inherently less of that older generation using social media. So I'm still trying to figure out a way to reach that demographic. As far as seeing a change over time and how people see themselves in their communities, I feel like I'm just starting to tap into that. This was my second year. I feel like the year's kind of closing now since it's getting cold, especially in farm world. Um, but so this year I have gone back to see people again, and it's really interesting to see them evolving both in their own personhood as well as their um, maybe role on a farm. But even in my photography as well, I just feel like we're all growing and changing, and it's really interesting to kind of see that portrayed visually. I'm trying to think whether or not I'll incorporate some sort of a reflection to kind of reflect that change as well. But I do think that that's going to be a big part in kind of like following people through time rather than trying to get a huge group of people. So I'm looking forward to that.
Maybe one more question. Yes. Yeah.
Why did she decide to run for mom, the regular mom?
Hmm.
And then also, like, how does she make money as a photographer, or is she sort of making like journalistic style only?
All right. Why did you yourself end up in a more rural setting, and how do you manage to make ends meet with photo or other stuff? So it's funny right now, I don't feel like we ended up in a rural setting. We bought a house kind of right next to our apartment where we were living in Madison, and that's kind of, I mean, it's not like New York, but it's definitely more city than farm. Mostly because we're having kids, and I think that we're going to need help from family and having them close to us. Um, so we're definitely still interested in living rurally, just not at this point in our lives. Um, as far as managing to make ends meet, I currently don't make any money with photography. I just spend all my money there. So I day job, full time. I'm 4 days a week, so I actually work with my mom. Family business. We do skincare type of stuff. So it's really flexible. It allows me to still pursue photography. So even though I'm not like professional as far as my career goes, I feel like it's kind of the perfect marriage for me in that I can pursue the photography that I'm really passionate about. So I'm very happy.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you.